30 Years a Watchtower Slave, Chapter 8, entitled God's Organization. The first subheading is entitled A Discrepancy Removed. During the 20s and 30s, there was a glaring discrepancy on the attack that the Jehovah's Witnesses had against Christendom and their use of organized religion, and the Witnesses' own building up their own theocratic organization. So with the 1926 convention coming up, they were told that something from Brooklyn would settle this apparent discrepancy, something big. And so once again, they awaited Bethel. They awaited for this big announcement. New light, I guess, was coming out. So how did they settle this discrepancy of Christendom's organization and this theocratic organization? Well, they explained that God has always had an organization, even from the beginning. In the book of Revelation, it was called the woman and her seed, and that was God's organization. But Satan, being the clever, deceitful person that he is, mimicked and copied God's organization. So now we had two opposing organizations, one from Jehovah and one from Satan, the devil. And so in this claim, the theocratic organization was able to lay a basis for its rules, those of theocratic rules, which called for works, rituals of turning in time and reporting these book placements and magazine placements, return visits, back calls, Bible studies, and so on and so forth. And so all of this was born from God's organization, or this woman. And this organization then was directed from Brooklyn, Bethel. So there became a us against them mindset. The Jehovah's Witnesses were in, and all others, regardless of who or what denomination, were on the out. And so the witnessing no longer consisted of gentle efforts to teach people about Christ and to baptize them. No, they couldn't settle for that. They had to denigrate and attack these other religious organizations. These were enemies to God. And so really this kind of warped all sense of values of Jehovah's Witnesses because of this theocratic organization doctrine. Saluting the flag now was wrong. Honoring emblems of the state was wrong. They said that these were now bowing down to Satan's image, and it became prohibited. Yet they were to, of course, bow down to the theocratic organization. Bearing arms, well, that was now an issue and became prohibited. And even alternative service was prohibited as well. And there were many other things that they did to set themselves apart from Christendom. The next subheading is entitled The Incentive Plan. Of course, the main objective of the Watchtower Society was to increase the sale of their books and magazines. And in order to do that, they had to light a fire underneath the witnesses to get them to sell more books. And they had these campaigns. Of course, we see that today. The witnesses do that with their literature. But the people at Bethel were told they could augment their income by making a special effort to sell these publications. And what was their special offer? Well, Judge Rutherford offered those in Bethel a bonus of 2 books free of charge for every 1 book they sold. And he mentions that when they were arrested, they pleaded that they were preaching and not making money at all, when in case they knew full well they were getting 200% profit. and that when they were arrested for peddling without a license, they claimed that they were preaching. This continued to be the case for many, many more decades until they stopped actually charging for their literature in the early 1990s. So this profit sharing caught on like wildfire, and soon Bethel reports were featured in the Service Director, which is a monthly organization paper. And this caused many congregations to emulate them. And such reporting eventually became standardized, with totals appearing in the monthly Service Director. I think that's the equivalent to the Kingdom Ministry that tells the witnesses on a monthly basis what's going on in their branch. And so now they were setting national quotas. You see the emergence of charts and paraphernalia and everything geared to sales organization. And now they had an avenue to exert pressure on other congregations, because if one congregation was doing an X amount of numbers of hours and selling X amount of number of books and magazines, well, the other congregation had to live up to that pressure. The next subheading is entitled Cadaver Gerasham. Excuse me if I am pronouncing that wrong. But it became very important that this new building there in Gatlinburg was completed, and completed very quickly, because the demand was there. The demand was more than they could supply. So with that in mind, it appears that those in Brooklyn were looking at what was going on in Germany, and it seemed like things were going rather slowly, because these were unpaid volunteers who were doing this work. So Brooklyn hired 3 worldly people, outsiders, to supervise and expedite the work, and they had specific instructions to bear down on the brothers to get this work done faster. And so during morning worship, they would use this platform to reprimand the brothers. Those there in Bethel would do this, but these outsiders, these worldly ones, would reprimand the brothers out in the field. And so he mentioned that the director of Bethel went so far as to call for Cadaver Gerasham, which in German denotes a corpse-like obedience. And he mentions that more than half of the workers quit shortly after that, and many others left as well later on. So those in Brooklyn Bethel, well, they took note of this for future reference, future blueprint that would be established in America, because the brothers, they learned that as long as the brothers, the insiders, kind of cracked the whip, the brothers would fall in line. But when this cracking of the whip came from worldly outsiders, well, then people were stumbled and they ended up leaving. So the author makes a good point, and I'll read it here. It seems that most of Jehovah's Witnesses, having sunk so low in individuality thinking, and having descended to the nadir of a zombie-like existence, will put up with slavery if it is forced upon them top-down theocratically by their own taskmasters. So he ends this chapter with this. Needless to say, they did have to hire outsiders to complete that building program in Magdeburg, Germany. This will conclude this chapter. Stay tuned for the next. Thank you for taking time to watch and listen to this presentation. Post your comments, like and share this video, subscribe to my channel, and stay tuned for the next chapter.